Hello, Darren Alf here from Bicycle Touring Pro. With the current invasion of Ukraine going on at the moment, I thought now would be the perfect time for me to share some of my bicycle touring photos and videos from my adventures in Ukraine. I've been riding my bike around the world for more than 20 years now, and I've cycled across Ukraine on two separate occasions. Once during the winter of 2012 and once during the Russian occupation of Crimea in 2014. So I have spent quite a bit of time in Ukraine, and I've actually traveled back to Ukraine on several occasions without my bicycle. So I've probably spent about 6 total months of my life in Ukraine, and it is honestly one of my favorite places in the entire world. I have dozens of friends there. I freaking love the place. It's so beautiful. So today I thought I would share some photos from my 2012 wintertime bike tour across Ukraine. This was back in 2012. So at the time I wasn't carrying a phone. I had no phone. I had no GPS. I had a video camera, like a little still camera that had video capabilities, but I was barely ever using it for video. I was mostly just taking photos. So I crossed the border from Romania into Moldova, which is a tiny little country, and then I crossed into the Russian-controlled territory of Transnistria, which is this little strip of land that runs between Moldova and Ukraine. So that is where our story is going to begin. And then you'll see me cross into Ukraine and continue from there up to the city of Lviv, Ukraine, which took me about 2 weeks to reach on my bicycle. So here we go. So this photo is from my very last night of camping in Romania. This is me packing up my bicycle in the morning. I spent camped out in the forest. That's my Co-Motion Cycles Pangea touring bicycle when I had it painted white. And you can see I'm wearing shorts at the time. It's early November at this point in time. Here we are. And then I went to Moldova. I'm not going to share the photos from that particular part of the trip with you, but here I am in Transnistria now, or this may actually be the road going into Transnistria. I don't like to take photos when I'm at the borders, just because you can get in trouble for doing that, especially in a place like Transnistria, which is basically controlled by Russia. So this is maybe the photo of me approaching the border of Transnistria from Moldova. Not exactly sure again where this is. This might be in Transnistria now. But yeah, I'm pretty sure this is Transnistria. So I got into Transnistria, the border patrols let me in, and they basically said, how long do you want to stay in Transnistria? And I said 3 days, because I wanted to go north up through Transnistria and see as much as Transnistria as I could. But the border patrol agent said, no, that's not going to happen. You have to cross Transnistria into Ukraine today. You can't stay overnight. So I was like, oh no, that wasn't my plan, you know? There was luckily a road straight across Transnistria over to Ukraine, but it was, I don't know exactly how far, 10 miles or something like that. And it was getting dark and there was only 4 hours or something of daylight. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I didn't know if it was flat or hilly or anything. And I wasn't planning to go that way, but I had to. So they allow me into Transnistria, and I take off down this road that I wasn't originally planning to go down. So here I am. This is just something on the side of the road here. You can see there's a lot of farmland off to the left. These signs, I can't read at all. I have no idea what they say. I just stopped here, take a photo of me in Transnistria. That's what it looked like. Not much going on out there. Farmland, kind of. Here's the road looking back in the direction that I had come from, and you can see it's quite flat, luckily. So I was able to go pretty fast. Here we are now. I've crossed all the way across Transnistria. While we're telling the story of Transnistria, when I was in the country, I noticed that there was a van following me on my bicycle, and it would kind of lurch behind me really slowly, and then it would zoom past me, go up ahead, park, and then it would stay up ahead of me, you know, almost out of distance, and then as soon as I got close, it would take off and come back towards me down the road, go behind me, and then turn around, come back, go really slow behind me again, and then drive past again and go further up the road and park again. So this was kind of scaring me, because I'm thinking I'm being followed, you know? And so at one point I took out my camera, which was this big DSLR camera that I had, and I zoom in really quick, and I look at the car that's following me, And inside the driver's seat of the car is a man wearing full camouflage, and he's got a set of binoculars up to his eyes like this, and he's looking directly at me through the binoculars, and I'm looking directly at him. So I put my camera down really quickly. I didn't take a picture, but I put my camera down really quickly, and I just pretend like I'm taking a photo of, you know, whatever I just showed here, like me. I think it was this right here, actually. Like you can see there's a vehicle up ahead of me. So I just pretend like I'm taking a picture of the sign, and then I continue on my way. But it was a little scary knowing that I was, in fact, being watched and followed. So anyways, here I am now at the border of Ukraine and Transnistria, and I can't tell you how happy I was to reach that border. There was a really nice border patrol agent once I got there, and he kind of was like, "Welcome to Ukraine," and I just got the best feeling on that first day cycling into Ukraine, and I just thought, this is going to be a great trip. I'm going to love it. So here I am just in Ukraine now. I've crossed the border. There's the signs welcoming me to Ukraine. And then I continued down the road for, I don't know, 10 miles, 20 miles, something like that. And it got dark, and like I said, I wasn't planning to go this way, so I had no idea what was over here. And so I ended up making camp in an orchard just off the side of the road. This is just wild camping. I wasn't really allowed to camp here, just kind of like farmland. And I set up my tent, and it got cold at night, and that was pretty much it. Here I am just taking various photos of myself around camp. But you can see how I'm like using the natural environment to hide. And in the morning, I was actually woken up by farmers in the area, so I had to like pack kind of quietly and get out of there. But when I woke up in the morning, the following morning, all of Ukraine was just covered in a deep, dark fog. Like, it was so dark, and sometimes you could only see 10, 20 feet in front of you or so. And these are just some of the plants that were in the orchard. And here's the fog. You can kind of see the fog. In reality, when I was there in person, the fog was much darker and you could barely see, but the camera kind of has an ability to shoot through that fog sometimes. So the photo is actually relatively clear in comparison to what it was like in real life. Here again is the fog of my tent. And then so I pack up on this first day, and I hit the road, and somewhere up the road was this crew of guys chopping down this tree on the side of the road. They're just like road construction workers. And I don't really remember this moment too well because it was 10 years ago. But these guys were basically just like yelling at me kind of when I cycled past, because they probably rarely ever see someone riding a bicycle in November across Ukraine. So I stopped and talked to them. I don't think they spoke English, but I just basically told them like where I was generally going. And I was navigating with a paper map at the time. Like I said, I didn't have a phone or a GPS or anything like that. So I kind of just told them like, I'm going to Lviv on my bicycle. And they were like, okay. and I snapped their photo. And here is a sign, speaking of maps, and you can kind of see the fog again and just how deep and dark and scary this fog is. Like, you could not see 100 feet up the road, and you'd hear cars coming way before they ever got to you. So, but this is a typical like Ukrainian road sign. And like I said, I have a paper map with me, which is just a general map of Ukraine, and it doesn't have like small little roads on it or anything. It's basically just the big highways and stuff. And I could tell that this sign off to the right said Odessa. The sign off to the left, I had no idea what that said, and the sign to the front of me, I have no idea what that said. The difficult thing about navigating in Ukraine was I had this paper map, but on my paper map, all of the names of the cities were in English. And once I got to Ukraine, all of the names of the cities were in this, Cyrillic. You know, like I couldn't read it, you know? So I would look at my map and try to figure out, what is that city to the left? What could that possibly be? And sometimes I would guess correctly and be like, oh yeah, okay, that's Odessa to the right, you know? And so then I'd say, okay, that's the way I need to go. And other times I would honestly just not know which way to go because I could not read my map. And so I'd go down a direction, I'd cycle 20 miles in that direction, and then I'd reach this town, and then I'd very quickly realize I had cycled 20 miles in the wrong direction to the completely wrong town. So this is something that I did over and over and over again as I cycled across Ukraine. I was constantly going in the wrong direction because I could not read my map and I could not read the signs, and I couldn't communicate with a lot of people that I came into contact with either. So it was a very, very difficult time, and the fog made it extremely difficult too because I couldn't tell which direction I was going or what was up the road at all in front of me. So anyways, here's a picture just of an old bus or something that was abandoned on the side of the road. Here I am. This is the first city that I had reached, and I don't know what city it was, frankly. I didn't know where I was half the time on this trip. I would just kind of go and hope that I made it to some destination. So you can see these Orthodox Ukrainian churches that are all across the country, which are pretty lavish and really kind of cool to see. And here I am in the first little city where I loaded up. I think I had to get some money, you know, I didn't have any Ukrainian money. So I stopped here and I was using an ATM or something to get some cash. In places like Ukraine, cash is still kind of used quite frequently, and especially in smaller cities. So having a credit card or something doesn't do you a lot of use in a lot of places, especially 10 years ago. Now I think it might be different. Here I am, I'm cycling down this hill, and you can kind of see the condition of the roads that I'm traveling on. They're pretty bad, and I was purposely choosing to go kind of on the worst possible roads that I could find, because the worst roads were the ones where there were the fewest cars, and that's kind of what I wanted. I could have stayed on like a main highway and had a much nicer road, but there would have been a whole bunch of cars. So I was traveling in between towns on these dirt roads and bumpy, you know, roads that hadn't been repaired in 20 years or whatever. So here up ahead of me is a tiny little town that I'm cycling into. You can still see the fog. There's a guy, old man, carrying stuff like a sack of potatoes or something, probably back to his house. I don't know how far he had to go to get those potatoes, but he's got a cane and he's carrying it on some sort of little hand cart. It just shows like what a different world people live in over there. And then this is the story that you might be familiar with. This dog just came out of nowhere and started following me during my first day on the road. And he stuck with me for 2 full days, spent a night with me, camping in my tent. And I took a ton of photos and videos with him. Just because it was such a unique thing. You know, I've had dogs follow me for quite a long distance on several of my bike tours, but this is the only dog ever in 20 years that has like stayed with me for 2 full days and actually camped with me in my tent overnight. So here is my bike, and you can kind of see him hiding off to the left-hand side. The dog was very, very shy and never really got close to me throughout my time, never let me like pet him or anything. Finally, when he camped in my tent at night, it was raining, and he did let me like pet him and stuff. But the next morning, again, he wouldn't come anywhere near me. But he was very friendly and followed me for 2 full days. It was kind of a sad thing though, because again, here, these are just photos of me traveling with the dog. This dog is following me. I don't own the dog. I don't know whose dog it is. It's just a wild dog. And I actually asked several people along the way, will you take this dog? You know, he's following me. And the people don't speak English because I'm out in the middle of the country. You know, if I was in a big city in Ukraine, I think people would speak English. But out there, nobody could really understand what I was saying. And there's wild dogs all over the place too. So this isn't a, you know, atypical thing to have a dog just belong to nobody. So he's just a dog that wanders around and kind of begs for food from people, I think. But it was very nice to have some company at the same time. So here's some young guys who are burning wood, something, doing farm work just on the side of the road here in Ukraine. And you can see the clouds of smoke are kind of mixing with the fog that was in the air, and so you really couldn't see where you were going. Here's the dog now. This is when I was camping the first night. This is my second night, I guess, of camping in Ukraine, but my first night with the dog. And he's looking at me like, where are we going here? And then we spent the night in our tent overnight, and it rained that night, and I woke up, it was freezing cold. And then we continue down the way, and the dog is still with me. I can't get rid of this dog. Part of the reason I couldn't get rid of the dog is because the roads were so bad that I was going so slow that he could keep up with me. You know, normally if I was on a smooth tarmac road, I could just go really fast and that dog would have been left behind in the first 5 minutes. But because these roads were so bad, this is a pretty good road right here. But for the most part, the roads were so bad, I was going so slow that the dog was able to keep up. And there were several times where I got maybe a kilometer ahead of that dog, and then I would like stop and rest and eat some food or something, and then all of a sudden the dog would show up again. So he was following me for a very, very long time. It was just some of the plants that I'm noticing on the side of the road. That's one of the things that I like about Ukraine, is the colors of the country are just so beautiful. Like, look at those colors. It's kind of amazing. And then the colors here, just the sunlight bouncing off the plant. I love the colors in Ukraine. You'll see that more in some of my future videos where I talk about Lviv, Ukraine, and the city and the people. Here's the dog again. He's still following me. I never fed him for the entire time because I didn't want to encourage him to follow me, but he was drinking out of puddles like this, and he was capturing little like frogs and crickets and stuff and eating them throughout our journey together. So he was very well versed on how to survive out in the wilds of Ukraine. Here we are. This is a perfect example of the kind of road that I was on and why the dog was able to keep up with me. This is kind of, just a little farm road that I'm going down that really probably only tractors drive on, but I was going down this on my bicycle and going very, very slow. So there's the dog. He's still with me. This is after 2 full days of cycling. And this is getting close to the time when I realize, like, I'm going to have to say goodbye to this dog because he can't come with me for 2 weeks, and I can't take him across international borders, and he's just a stray dog, you know? So eventually I did have to say goodbye to the dog, which was kind of heartbreaking, to be honest. Like, for me, it's nice to have some company out there. I had been traveling for months at this point on my own, so any kind of company, even the company of a dog, is really nice. So here I am. I've reached some city. I don't know where I am. And I met some guy there who actually, I think he was on a bicycle and he rode with me for a little while. This guy here, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but yeah, he took my picture and we had a nice little talk and stuff. Again, I'm just kind of shooting some of the things that I'm seeing on the road. There's a lot of abandoned and blown up buildings and that sort of thing out there, which I find frankly kind of interesting, but I realize how war-torn it sort of looks. But these are just old buildings. I'm just kind of goofing around and taking pictures of myself and my bike. Here's a nice little road. I have no idea what that sign says. I just kind of thought it was a scenic thing, showing kind of a classic Ukrainian farm road with the trees and the farm off to the side. Ukraine has tons and tons of farmland. A lot of the food that goes across Europe and maybe even around the world comes from Ukraine. So Ukraine is really a valuable part of Europe and of the world. These guys were border patrol agents that I just happened to meet in the center of some town, and they spotted me. I don't know if I was pulled over or if they pulled me over or what it was, but they were 3 really, really nice guys, and they spoke English, and which I appreciated because I hadn't spoken English, very often. And we just kind of talked. I don't remember their names or exactly what the encounter was about, but they were just kind of welcoming me to Ukraine, which was very, very nice. So here I am, I'm taking my picture, and you can see I'm wearing a face mask, and I've got it pulled down for the photo, but I was wearing it up over my face because it's very, very cold. Part of the reason I don't have video from this trip is because it was so cold that I didn't want to constantly have my video camera out. I would pull it out to take a photo, but then I'd quickly put my camera away and put my gloves back on. So again, these are the sorts of roads that I'm just going down and the sorts of towns that I'm coming through. Look at this house on the right. It's kind of all falling apart. It's cool. Look at that pile of firewood. Heat your home in the wintertime. This is a little cemetery that I came across. You can see there's like wooden crosses, metal crosses, some concrete headstones. And one of the things I think is kind of nice about Ukraine is a lot of these headstones have a photo of the person who's died on the headstone, which I think is super nice, because I think it's so sad when there's like a headstone and it just says like John Smith 1898 to 1942 or something, and there's no other details or information about that person. Whereas here I can look at that headstone and go, I see the person. I know, I have an idea of who that was. This is a bus stop on the right-hand side here, and across Ukraine they have the most interesting bus stops all across the country. Like practically every single one is different, and this is just one of the many bus stops. I would use these bus stops to kind of like take shelter in from the rain and the cold, and just like take a snack break or a lunch break sometimes. So there's a bus stop there. This is another road that I'm just traveling down. Another road. There's my bike. This is on, I guess, probably the third night of camping in Ukraine. And you can kind of see how cold and wet it is. Here I am. I'm just taking some photos of me and my bicycle and where I was camping. I didn't take a picture every night. Like I said, I just kind of took pictures whenever I could muster up the courage to take off my gloves. You can see in these photos that I'm wearing gloves, and it was definitely a lot colder than it looks in the photos. So here's just another old building that I thought was kind of cool, and the farmland sort of framed through the distance there. Yeah. And this is a little market. It looks like the front of someone's home or something, but it's actually like a supermarket in the middle of nowhere. And it took me a while to figure out that a store like this was where I could get my food, because when you look at the store from the outside, there's no obvious sign or anything that this is a store. It just looks like a commercial building or something. But this is actually a market. And so I went into this place, and I went in there, and I don't have a photo from the inside because I didn't want to scare people by taking out my camera in a market, but it's basically a little room about as big as my bedroom right here. And there were 3 women in there, elderly women, that looked very much like this woman kind of outside, you know, wearing this pink floral gown and a headscarf and everything. So 3 women in there, and they're behind a counter like old school markets would be, and all the food is behind the market, and you kind of have to point and tell them what you want, and they get it off the counter and they put it on the counter, and then they ring you up, and then you pay, and then you continue on your way. So it's a very cool little place, and I wish I had some photos or videos from inside, but like I said, I generally don't do that when I'm traveling, because I just don't want to. It's weird, you know, I'm a complete stranger. They don't know me or anything, and I don't want to scare them. So here's the market again, and I stopped there, and you can see the food on the back of my bicycle. I remember I bought the only fresh food that was in this entire place was a thing of bananas. So you can see the yellow bananas on the back of my bicycle, and I also remember buying some sort of, it was like a cracker or a cookie, and I didn't know what it was, but it just looked good at the moment, and it turned out to be very good. They were like banana crackers or cookies, I'm not sure. Anyways, here's some people coming up the road on a little motorcycle with a sidecar. Little old woman in the seat there looking very cold. This is, I don't know what this is, just there's an old woman there outside this building. Again, I think this is another one of these markets. You can kind of see on the right hand side, it looks like a little store or something there, so maybe I went in and got some food there. This is just a typical Ukrainian countryside home, and here I am in a small little village, and I was kind of capturing the scene of what it looks like here. 3 women, the way they're dressed is just so different than anything you would see in the United States, for example, and in many parts of the world. But they're dressed very, very nicely, which is very common in Ukraine. A lot of people dress super nice, way nicer than people dress here in the United States. So very, very interesting, I think, looking at these people up close. And then here's a sign for I don't know what that says. The reason I took this photo once again is just because I had this paper map that was in English, and I'm looking at the signs in Ukrainian and going, where did these 2 things match up? Where is this town on my map? Because I have no idea where I am right now. And that's like the longest name possible. So just kind of a funny little thing. Also, you can see that they use the Ukrainian flag colors on all of the signs, and these colors, the blue and the yellow, are on a whole bunch of things, on bridges and gates and signs all across Ukraine, which makes traveling across the country really cool, I think, because we don't see that so much in America. It's not like bridges are painted red, white, and blue, and fences are painted red, white, and blue all across the country, but in Ukraine, that's very much the case. So kind of neat. Here is one of the ways that I was getting water on my bike tour across Ukraine. There were wells all across the country in these little villages and on the side of the road. And this is a stork with a bucket on the end of it, and you can see the well at the bottom of the photo. And you would take this lid off of the well, and then you would lower this bucket down into the well, and a whole stork would lower its head down. And then you'd scoop up some water, and then you'd raise this thing back up, and you'd have this entire bucket full of water that you could drink. And so that's how I was getting my water for a lot of this trip. I was either buying it in the stores or I was getting it from these wells. So this is one of the more unique water sources that I've ever had on any of my bike tours anywhere in the world. And storks are another thing that you see a lot of in Ukraine, real ones as well as reproductions, kind of like this. Storks are all over the place in Ukraine. Here's a park with a giant military airplane just kind of parked in the middle of it, and then you can see these little like wooden ramps where you can go out and fish or something in the park, which is kind of cool. And then here I am once again camping in my tent. You can see how deep and dark the fog is. This particular evening I went off the road in order to camp, and I was going down this like little trail basically through the forest, through something like this. And it's dark and it's foggy and you can barely see, when all of a sudden I'm pushing the bike and I suddenly feel like I'm being watched. And I look off to my right hand side, and over here off to my right, like about 50 feet away or so, is a man, and he's a giant man. He's 7 feet tall. He looks like he weighs 300 pounds, and he's just standing there watching me as I walk past through the fog. He's not moving at all. He's just watching me, and I'm watching him as I just keep pushing my bike. And he doesn't wave, he doesn't move, I don't wave at him. We just kind of move past each other in the fog in the middle of the forest, both of us probably going, what the heck is that guy doing? And it was kind of creepy, but anyways, so I go a short ways down through the forest, and this is where I ended up spending the night. And you can see it was freezing cold at night. I woke up in the morning and there was frost everywhere. Like my entire tent was covered in frost, and it was so frozen solid that like I had to fold my tent like in almost like I was folding paper, like origami. It was like cracking my tent in half in order to fold it all up. And I woke up and I had frost all across my body and on my face. You'll see all of the plants were covered in like a thick frost like this, because it was foggy. There was all this fog in the air, and then it froze onto everything. So just everything around was covered in frost. You can see all the plants covered in frost. This is me in the morning. This is how I was sleeping I was sleeping with my face mask on, this beanie on, all of my jackets. I had 3 jackets that I was wearing, snow pants. And on this particular day, I woke up and you can see my left eye is all swollen shut, kind of like dehydrated swollenness or something. So I was just kind of documenting that. Here again, I'm back on my bicycle now and heading down the road, and you can see the frost and the fog just everywhere. At the time I was riding without sunglasses or anything, and you can see some of the frost just kind of collecting on my eyebrows and eyelids. Here's my water bottle, which was completely or almost completely frozen solid, once again proving just how cold it was. Here is another one of these bus stops on the side of the road. It looks like it's next to a small lake there on the right. You can see on the left is some little cart or something with people on it, but it's painted like the Ukrainian flag. Like I said, they use these colors, yellow and blue, on a lot of different things all across Ukraine. So it's really cool to see. Anyway, so I stopped and took my photo here with this Ukrainian flag bus stop. You can see there used to be some sort of mosaic there, but it looks like it was painted over. Again, here's just a freezing cold road, and you can see kind of the condition that these farm roads were in, where there's dirt and stuff. Probably horses and things are traveling on the right there, and cars are just kind of going down the middle. But the good thing about these roads and cycling across Ukraine was I was on such roads as this that there was just so few cars the entire trip. Maybe one car every 20 minutes or something like that. So it was really kind of nice to be cycling across the country in these conditions, just because there was no one out there. Here I stopped in a little town. This was like I think this is like a political sign that had been taped up to a telephone pole or something. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Here again is another little town in the middle of nowhere. You can see this place is completely dilapidated, but here's an old man with a cane kind of walking down the sidewalk. And here's another shot of that same town, but these are the sorts of places that I'm going through. This town, this building, the one that's in the best condition at the end of the street, has a sign at the top of it that says 1992. But you would guess that these other buildings around it are much, much older. Here's another farmland sort of scene. Again, this is the kind of thing that I was cycling across for days and days. Here's a super foggy day in Ukraine. Again, you can probably only see about 50 feet up the road, and then it just disappears. Here again, you can barely see these people. You're cycling through the fog, there's nothing practically, and then all of a sudden you see 2 cars and 2 people standing off to the side of the road, So, very interesting little scene there. And then this is on another night when I was camping in the woods. I was camping for 2 weeks straight on this particular trip in freezing cold temperatures, and I would get wet all day long. Then I'd sleep in my wet tent, and then I'd wake up wet, and I'd continue again in the freezing cold temperatures. It was brutal, but it was kind of amazing all at the same time, as crazy as I know that sounds. So this was another night that I'd spent camping. I went down this forest road, and then in the morning I took this photo kind of as I was cycling out of my campground. So again, you can see how foggy it is, and hopefully you can imagine how cold it is. Here's another one of my campsites in the forest, and now here, this is actually a pretty good, it's a terrible photo, but it's a good representation of what it was like to go shopping for food in Ukraine, because this was actually one of the larger markets that I went to on my trip. And this was a sort of market where there were these different vendors all within one space inside the market. So you can see, like, there's a woman over here to the left and there's a woman over here to the right. This woman on the left, she's in charge of like those 2 little counters and the food behind the counter, and that's it. And then the next woman over, she's in charge of those 2 little counters and the food behind her. So you would kind of go up to each little woman, and whatever they had that you wanted, you'd kind of say, like, can I have that orange juice up there? And you'd pay her, and then you'd go to the next woman and you'd say, can I have those bananas up here? And then you'd pay her. And very much like you would do in a lot of places in the world, South America and stuff like that. So, but this little supermarket had everything that you could possibly think of. You can see there's like teddy bears, gifts for children, Easter baskets, all kinds of fruit and cheese and meat and dairy and canned goods and all kinds of stuff, cologne, bath products, everything that you could possibly need. And so this store, it looks very different than the supermarkets that you might see in more developed parts of the world, but they had freaking everything. And here I am in another market. This is a different market, but again, it was so cold and foggy that I had trouble with the focus on my camera. So a lot of my pictures came out blurry like this. But these 3 guys who are very young they saw me on my bicycle, and they kind of asked about my trip, and I told them what I was doing, and they thought it was really cool, and I said, can I take your photo? And you can see, I think this guy on the left is eating ice cream, and Ukraine has some amazing ice creams actually, and it was so cold on this particular trip that I was able to carry ice cream on my bicycle for several days at a time and just eat it whenever I wanted to, because it was so cold outside that the ice cream didn't melt. here's one of the stores. I think this was a like an Italian restaurant sort of that I went into. They had like pizza and pasta, and there's like a salad bar or something like that you can see. I just went in there mostly, one, to get food, but also to get out of the cold. And the girls working there, I remember, were so nice, and they were so interested in who I was, because I was obviously an outsider, that they came over to my table and look at what they're wearing. Like, it's so different than anything you would see in any other part of the world. So it's just a really, really cool place that I went there. This is some town, I'm not even sure where this is. This is like in the middle of Ukraine somewhere. This is kind of a bus station off to the left-hand side, and the town is off to the right. And again, you can see how cold and foggy it is. Kind of hustling and bustling sort of town. Here's people getting on a train. And this, again, you can see the blue and the yellow train painted in the Ukrainian colors. And I actually ended up getting on this train and traveling some distance across Ukraine with my bicycle, which was a whole experience. And I get into this little train, and there's no spot for my bicycle. So what they had me do was put the bicycle way up high. There were little compartments with 6 beds inside of each compartment. And I paid for one compartment for me to sleep in on this train, and then they put my other bicycle up on the bed above me in this other little, bed compartment. And then I had to share this compartment with 4 other people, 1 guy below me and 3 guys on my right hand side. And one of these guys on my right hand side was this old man who was drunk out of his mind. Like, he was drinking, he had 2-liter things of beer, like big soda bottles filled with beer, and he was trying to get me to drink it. And I was like, no, no, no. And at one point he like took it off and put it up to my mouth, and I did actually drink like that much out of this beer bottle. And it was disgusting, And he was like, yay, I got the American to drink his beer or something. I don't know. But the whole train ride, he was trying to get me to talk to him, and he didn't speak a word of English, and I don't speak a word of Ukrainian or Russian. So it was just a funny train ride and an experience overall. But it was kind of fun to be on the train and to travel in a way outside of my bicycle. So again, just look at the way people are dressed. It's so different. But again, like, people dress really, really nicely. I like those blue moon boots. Those will keep you warm in the cold Ukrainian weather. Here's an old woman sitting on the train. She's kind of looking out the window there. Again, this is some other city. I don't know where this is, but you can see how cold and foggy it is. Another city. I don't know. And an old woman just walking through the street with her shopping. And then eventually I reached the city of Lviv, Ukraine, which is where my bike tour came to an end. Now, that whole thing that you just saw, all of those photos, was over the course of about 2 weeks, maybe even 20 days. I'm not exactly sure. 2 weeks, 14 to 20 days, something like that, to cross in from Transnistria into Ukraine, and then to slowly cycle my way to Lviv, Ukraine. And once I got to Lviv, I ended up spending another 2 weeks or so, maybe 20 days again, 2 weeks, 20 days, something like that, in the city of Lviv, Ukraine, which is in western Ukraine. And this used to be a part of Poland, I believe. So this is honestly one of my most favorite cities in the entire world that I've ever been to, one of the most colorful, characteristic cities I think I've ever been to. And I am going to make another video in the future just about the city of Lviv and some of the people that I met there, because I love this place so much. I even considered buying property in Lviv and moving there myself. That's how much I like this place. So that is my video about my 2012 wintertime bike tour across Ukraine. I hope you enjoyed seeing these photos from my trip and hearing some of the stories. Like I said, I just love Ukraine. It's one of my favorite places in the world, and so I wanted to share some of the reasons that I like this country so much. I know these photos that I shared today kind of make the country look run down and dilapidated, but that's largely because I was traveling through these very, very remote sections of the country, and doing so on purpose because I wanted to travel on roads where there were very few vehicles along the way. So in my next video, you're going to see modern Ukraine, which is very, very different from what you saw in the photos in this video. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching and following along. I really, really appreciate it. Stay tuned for my future Ukraine videos, and I hope to see you out on the road sometime soon. Bye-bye.